So I want to talk about responsibility flow today. So I've got a question and I want to leave this open for discussion a little bit. Does responsibility flow uphill, meaning from the crew up through the assistants, general managers, area supervisor to the owner? So does it flow uphill or does responsibility flow downhill? So let's look at the irresponsibility model first. So irresponsibility flows uphill if you allow it. Okay. So it flows uphill if you allow it to. And responsibility flows downhill if you design it. So if you don't design it, then irresponsibility will overtake responsibility. It's kind of like a little bit of a tug of war. And if you don't design it with responsibility flowing from the top down, then irresponsibility will flow from the bottom up. So if we look at it from the point of irresponsibility, it's just the flip side of responsibility. Okay, let's dig into this a little bit more and look at this from a more of a practical perspective. There's something called the responsibility choice. It's basically every person has a choice at any given moment to do the responsible thing or to do the irresponsible thing, right? They can either embrace responsibility or avoid it. And so everybody at any given moment has that choice, from the crew leader all the way up to, the owner. Let's say a crew person cannot fulfill their responsibility for whatever reason. They can't come into work. And so in this case, they avoid their responsibility. Now, maybe they don't avoid their responsibility and they actually embrace their responsibility and they find somebody else to work for them, in which case, problem solved, irresponsibility avoided, and we're all good. So this employee has that choice to embrace responsibility by finding somebody to work for them. Now, what if they don't? What if they don't do that? Then what happens? They can't get somebody else to work for them or whatever. Then that irresponsibility falls on the next person up. Then that person who's running the shift has a problem that they have to deal with. So now that problem falls on their shoulders. Would you guys agree with that? This happens? And then what happens if that person just for whatever reason can't solve that problem? They just can't take on that extra responsibility. Maybe they're just not available or not willing to be available, or maybe they're already working, whatever the case is. So sometimes you can't embrace that responsibility just because you can't, because you're just not empowered to do so or in a situation to do it. So then in that case, that irresponsibility flows to the next person, right? This person, this assistant manager or shift leader, whoever, if they can't take care of the responsibility for that shift, then it falls to the GM, right? And so the GM has that choice. They can embrace that responsibility, take the extra step to find coverage or whatever the case might be, or worst case scenario to cover it themselves if they must. That's not the first priority, but and then what if that person can't do it? What if the GM just can't come in? Again, maybe there's good reasons for it. Sometimes there's not good reasons for it. So if the GM cannot embrace that responsibility to do that, and they avoid that responsibility, then it falls on the next person up, right? And if that person can't do it, then it falls on the next person, right? You see how that works? So irresponsibility flows uphill and it's contagious, right? Irresponsibility is contagious. This person might drop the ball, and these people maybe just really don't like this person because they're dropping the ball all the time. Like, no, I'm not going to work for you. It's your job to work. And then this person is kind of sick and tired of this person dropping the ball, and they're like, I'm not going to do this, and then it can go uphill. It can go uphill, especially when everybody is looking to do as little as they have to instead of as much as they can. Or if people are only looking to do just what they're responsible for, they're not looking to enhance responsibility in the future, to develop something better for the future, just kind of the putting out fires perspective. And the truth is, we can get tired of putting out fires if we don't actually do some fire prevention. So the whole idea here is that anything less than 100% individual responsibility transfers up to the next level, right? Next person's problem. So that's how the irresponsibility funnel works. All right, so let's look at the responsibility funnel. And so that's going to be just the opposite. This follows the principle of anything less than 100% responsibility needs to be your problem to fix. So this is basically saying, hey, the buck stops here. I'm going to protect the person that I work for. I'm going to make sure that this does not fall to them, right? And ideally, it's great if that starts from the crew. If the crew person says, hey, I'm going to take responsibility, I'm going to make sure that I do this thing, whether it's showing up for work, running your shifts, having good appearance and good professionalism and responsibility with customers, that kind of thing. Everybody takes on responsibility here, then it makes it easier for the next level, right? And the next level, the next level. So it flows downhill. So the whole idea here is that every person, all of you guys are my responsibility. I'm responsible for like everybody below here. So if we're having a problem, I am responsible, but it doesn't mean that I'm responsible to just pick up the pieces for all the irresponsibility. It means I'm responsible to put responsibility in place. So if I have an area supervisor that's just dropping the ball and disappears for 2 weeks and doesn't do anything and none of the managers like, that's on me to because I put that person there, right? So it's up to me to take the responsibility, put the right person in place. And then the area supervisor, and the senior leaders, it's if they don't work with the GMs and help the GMs to become fully responsible, then it's going to make their job harder too. So the better that they are and the more responsible they are with training GMs to take that responsibility and learn how to keep that irresponsible behavior from flowing up, then the better they're going to be. And then the GMs, when they can teach their assistant managers and hire responsible assistant managers and shift leaders and put those people in place and teach responsibility, then their job is going to get easier and everybody's job up the line gets easier and all the way down below. And then the assistant managers and the shift leaders can help the GM to teach our crew to all be responsible. Now, what does that look like? That means talking about the standards. It's about creating a culture of accountability, expectations, and a culture of excellence, so that everybody kind of understands what we need to do, and they're energized to do it right. When you get stores, and we've got several stores that really don't have a big problem with attendance, and it's because there's a culture being built because this responsibility line has been strong through the bottom when we have breakdowns. So let's say we've got some crew that aren't being responsible. Well, then it's the GM's responsibility and the assistant's responsibilities to get people in there that can be responsible. So that's where we can take responsibility by making the choices to putting the right people in place that can be responsible. And responsibility is also contagious. It does flow downhill. And sometimes it doesn't get all the way down to the bottom. And sometimes there can be irresponsibility at the top. If you've got an owner that's irresponsible, it's going to be really hard for them to have a responsible area supervisor. And if the owner, the area supervisor isn't responsible, it's going to be harder to have responsible general managers. And then that irresponsibility will creep back up, and then that owner is going to have a tough time. So there's a filter that I like to use when we're evaluating our potential employees or our current employees. And it's really simple. It's really easy if we just ask ourselves with each one of our employees or potential employees, do they want it? Or are they motivated? Do they desire to be valuable to the company and to do a good job? Can they do it? So do they have the right skills to do it? At this level, at the crew level, most people do. Not everybody can do it. Some people just can't do it. Do they understand it? Are the standards clear? Are the expectations clear? Are the desires of how they can, best help the company? Are those things clear? And do they understand it? And then do they agree to it? Because it doesn't matter if they understand it if they don't agree to it, right? And that's kind of the final one. So do they want it? Can they do it? Do they understand it? And do they agree to it? So if you get these answers being, the answers to these questions being yes, all the way down, you're going to have a really, really strong team. And the idea is that when people say no to these or when they can't say yes to this, then it's our job to help them get there or move them out and bring somebody else in. Working with people and keeping people that don't agree to it or they don't understand it. We just keep pushing them and pushing them until Hopefully that they do understand it and they do agree to it, but a lot of times they just never do. All right. So that's part of the responsibility funnel. Every leader is fully responsible to teach and hold their followers to be fully responsible. Okay. So every leader is fully responsible to teach and hold their followers to be fully responsible. If ever you think differently, you are the irresponsible one. And so is your leader for leaving you in place. It sounds a little harsh, but it's kind of true. It's kind of true. That's where responsibility comes from. It's helping our followers be fully responsible. As a leader, it's our responsibility to help those in our care to learn and become fully responsible for their sake, not become obedient for our sake. Can somebody explain the difference between those to me? Help me understand the difference.
You want people to understand their own reflection of themselves with being irresponsible, because it's not going to help get them to achieve any of their goals in life. People notice irresponsibility everywhere that they go, and if your goal is to, you know, uh, climb the ladder and achieve a higher goal or get the higher pay, it's in their best interest to be and learn to be responsible.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes both ways. You can avoid, negative consequences like job hopping because you just never quite measure up enough to move to the next level, or excelling at what you do because you're doing well and you're taking full responsibility and you're, doing more than what you're asked. And then you can just fly up the ladder if you do that. And when we can teach people that they are in control of their own destiny based on their performance and how responsible they are, that opens up a whole door for people. You can see the light bulb come on in young people when you can cast that vision and they can see that, oh, so I can take on more responsibility. And if I just kind of bear into this and kind of get over this hump, then I can move up and it's all up to me if I just kind of take that extra level of responsibility. So yeah, that's big. The more you use your authority to leverage, pressure, or manipulate people towards compliance, the more resistant or disagreeable they will be. They will navigate away from responsibility. Do any of you guys not like this?
People, if you do not have a growth mindset, then you're not going to like this.
Yep. This is the boss mentality right here. This is when we're saying, when we're getting frustrated with people and our frustration is just showing and we're showing our annoyance with people's lack of responsibility. The reason that we're frustrated is because other people are lacking in their responsibility. And rather than taking responsibility to help them become more responsible, we're trying to take a shortcut and not be responsible for that. And instead, we're trying to just take a shortcut and force obedience. When we're a boss and we have to use our authority, it's only because of a lack of leadership. We use our authority in place of our leadership skills. And when we have leadership skills, we don't have to use our authority. We don't ever have to flex our muscles or try to coerce or put our foot down. And it doesn't mean that there's not sometimes we need to do that, but when we do that, there needs to be a plan and there needs to be an end in place. Like we're using that at the end of the line when somebody's on their way out the door, not to try to keep people that we plan on keeping, to try to get them just to be better. We just keep pushing and harping on them to get better. That's what this means, right? Okay, so you can see the little arrows here. When you're pushing hard with your authority, trying to get something done, you actually get the opposite done. Your crew becomes more dysfunctional. It becomes more irresponsible. The more we try to cause it to happen, to make it happen. The more you use your leadership to connect with and inspire them, the more collaborative and agreeable they will be. They will gravitate towards responsibility. And the only way you can go wrong with this approach, this connecting and inspiring, is if you've got the wrong people. If you've got the wrong people, they may not respond to even that. And we don't have the leadership. That's when we resort to the authority, because it's like they're not going to respond to the right way, so I'm going to make them do it. That's a telltale sign that either your leadership is lacking or you've got the wrong people. And the wrong people, their leadership is going to be lacking too. If they can't be responsible for themselves and take 100% responsibility for their actions and being there, then, they're the wrong people. I can tell you this, if anybody thinks young people just can't be responsible, it's like, it's just a generational thing. They're all irresponsible. They're all blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, BS. That's not true. It just means we got to look a little bit harder for them possibly, but they're out there. There's some so great people, and you guys know we have some really terrific people working in our company, and sometimes we had to, we had to work hard to go find them, right? We had to sort through some of the irresponsible people to get to them, but they're out there. We just got to go find them and not chase them away with our authority. Here's a chart that gives us kind of a graphic of kind of how this responsibility flow works. So at the top, you got the owner. You see this guy's got a cane because we're all old, right? And then you got the different layers of management, and then down here. Realistically, the operational responsibilities need to be spread out like this. I mean, really, when you think about the face-to-face interactions with our customers, for instance, our crew is going to do, a really big percentage of that, right? There's a lot more crew people than there are members of management. So it needs to be spread out. There's a lot more shifts that are being worked by crew people, and shift leaders than there are general managers. That responsibility needs to be broad at the bottom. Now, it's not very high. In other words, like our crew, they don't really have a lot of huge responsibilities. It's not a very difficult job. It's being a crew person in a Papa Murphy's is really not hard at all. You just got to show up to work on time, be responsible for getting yourself there, looking right, making the pizzas the right way, and being professional and being nice and talking to people. Really not a big level of operational responsibility. We need to uphold those things. We can't just let those easy level of responsibilities flop because it's just not that hard to be, a halfway decent pizza maker. You just gotta, just be responsible. That's really it. They don't even have to have a lot of skills. And the same way with like the shift leaders. It's not that hard, but it's more difficult than this. So there's definitely a more of a level of responsibility needed because you've got to be responsible for the shifts and there's extra things you got to do. And at the GM level then too. Now that's not an easier job. That's not an easy, I mean, it's easier than some positions, but it's not an easy job. You're responsible for several people. And so that level of responsibility needs to kick up to the next level. You can't use your authority on that level. That irresponsibility will flow uphill if you do that. That's how this works. There's other responsibility, the people at the top that we take on instead of operational responsibilities. Now, you guys all will have operational responsibilities. You all make some pizza stuff, and I have very little operational responsibilities except for the systems and those things. But there's administrative responsibilities, right? And then there's leadership responsibilities. And the higher you go up on the chain, the greater those responsibilities are. We can't take on more operational responsibilities at the top here and let our administrative or our leadership responsibilities lack. We can't just fail to be a leader because we would just rather be a glorified shift leader. This is what it looks like when we allow irresponsibility to flow uphill. When we do that, this blue and yellow here, this is like the operational. So when people here are dropping the ball on operations and the people above that need to take on more responsibility for operations, and then it flows upward, and now you got the GMs that are working their tails off putting out fires, working for these people that don't want to show up, and these people that don't want to weigh and measure and don't want to do the things right, and it puts more pressure on the people the further you go up. There has to be there has to be a place where we stop this because this is an overload zone. When we have all kinds of irresponsibility here, it overloads people here. Now there's an overload zone. There's more leadership responsibilities that has to take place at the top. Administrative responsibilities that get skipped because we're busy working operational responsibilities that others are dropping. And I'll tell you, it does hurt, and it's supposed to hurt. It's supposed to hurt because it tells you that we're either doing something wrong or we're not doing something well enough. And I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. I'm empathizing with you all because this is just a hard job. It can be a hard job until you get on top of it and you learn the right practices. On this side over here, when we have leaders, the red people here kind of represent people that are kind of under the line of responsibility. they're not quite there. And the green kind of represents people that are above responsibility. These are the responsible people. The blue people here, these are kind of people that are kind of in between. They could be responsible, that they just need some extra work. And then the red people here, these are the ones that don't want to and aren't going to take on the responsibility that's needed for the job, right? So if you've got a situation like this here, where the owner's irresponsible and the area supervisor's irresponsible and the general managers are, irresponsible. And then if you do have some responsible people in the company, they're soon to leave. They're going to leave because, well, this general manager doesn't want to work with a bunch of other general managers that are irresponsible. They don't want to be asked to pick up the slack for all of these irresponsible general managers. So the responsible general managers are going to leave, right? Or assistant managers, they're going to leave because they don't want to work next to a bunch of other irresponsible assistant managers or an irresponsible general manager or owner or area supervisor. They don't want to work in that system, so they move on to somewhere else. And the same way with down here, right? The responsible crew people, it's like, I don't want to stick around here. This is a mess. This is dysfunctional. I get yelled at all the time and everybody's irresponsible. Nobody does their part. I feel like I'm the only one that does my part. I'm going to go someplace else where I'll be appreciated. And then we flip over here to this side, and this is more of a responsibility model where pretty good responsibility. And then maybe you've got, a responsible area supervisor, responsible ownership. You've got some responsible general managers, but maybe once in a while you get some general managers who aren't responsible. We have to do some. Now, this person may not automatically want to leave. They may or may not because they've got pretty good situation. They've got other people that are taking responsibility for themselves, pretty functional organization. But if this person still doesn't want to do that, then they may need to leave. Or maybe a general manager, a responsible general manager, might have an assistant manager that just doesn't want to be responsible and they need to leave, or crew people and they need to leave. So the difference here is that the good people leave on their terms. Over here, we need to have the irresponsible people leave on our terms. That's how you get this whole thing being green, is first of all, us being fully responsible for ourselves, and then teaching everyone below us to be fully responsible for themselves. And that does not come from being a boss or using authority. It comes from leadership. It's getting to know them, connecting and expecting and challenging them and standing by them and guiding them. That's why we do the coaching, right? That's the whole process. And then you get these blue people. We got to get these blue people into green people. They just need some help. They're not irresponsible. They can be responsible, but when left alone, they can also be irresponsible if they're hanging out with a bunch of irresponsible people. So they can kind of go both ways. So we got to get them in the hands of the responsible people so they can turn into those. And many people are that way. I remember being that way when I was 16, 17 years old. I was a person. I could be just as irresponsible as the people around me. And I think I was about as responsible as the people around me. And it wasn't until, some responsible people kind of grabbed me and helped me develop that I started becoming more responsible. On a recruiting level here, if we're an irresponsible manager that's really lacks in leadership and we're just not willing to take the responsibility for everybody below us, then we're really going to just have people like this under us. The irresponsible people that don't want it, maybe they don't want to be responsible. They just don't want that level of responsibility. They want to go ahead and let it slide to the next level, maybe, right? Or they're unwilling to learn it, or they don't understand it, or they're not willing to do it. This is the blue area. These are the people that usually they're younger and they just don't know yet, and they're, that can kind of blow with the wind. And if somebody, a good leader, grabs a hold of them, they can really turn them into something. I was fortunate to have that when I was young. Somebody grab me and say, "Hey, look, dude, you got to stop being a jackass and let me teach you how you can make the most of your life," and helped me become responsible. So a person that's low responsibility, they want it, they're willing to learn it, but maybe they don't know it. They could understand it if somebody explains it to them, and they do agree to it, but it doesn't matter if you agree to it if no one's willing to help to teach it, right? So, and then you got the high responsibility. These are the people that want it, they can do it, they do understand it, and they agree to it. You guys can all identify people, well, hopefully, you guys can all identify people in your store that fall into this category, and we cherish them. We like them. And if we are like that, we'll attract these people too. If we're a blue and we're running a store, we're going to attract more blue and red. We're not going to attract these people. These people will leave. So we really have to strive to become this first. We've got to be responsible leaders first. And then Be responsible for all of the people below you taking on responsibility for themselves. They have to be fully responsible for them first before they can jump up a level and be responsible for other people and help other people responsible.